Where's your coffee?
Why, Kurt, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east. That would make you the sun, sir.
That's beautiful. So I guess we don't have any topics we want to cover today. So we're going to go and get right to work. Is that what we understand?
Let's get to work.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I will say this. I'm studying this. The Twitter feed is interesting because it's just random consciousness.
Streams of consciousness. Yes.
And it's like what's interesting is it's falling walls of division among those on the right, which were previous. These are load bearing walls. They're carrying the load of the left and they're falling down.
Let's see.
That's my
Let
impression.
me let me ask a profoundly hard question.
Mm.
So, Christianity did its work really well, right? And so, people between Christianity, the law, manorialism, militarism, natural European militarism, which is the militia-based military. A couple of things, but mostly those things. We managed to push responsibility way down, and for people to seek status by obtaining a responsibility rather than status by obtaining the ability to be irresponsible.
Right.
And that's a profound difference between cultures, right?
That'll be liberty, libertinism as a avoidance of responsibility, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well, that's one. And the opposite side of it is corruption,
Yes.
right? So that's so you can be positively irresponsible in the libertine sense, or negatively irresponsible in the authoritarian or corrupt sense. So the problem we have in the Islamic world is it's heroic, and in Africa too. Corruption is still heroic,
Mm.
right? And um, so they can't. That's why they can't organize good military for save their souls. So, but they can organize raiding bands of raiding, right? They can. It's very voluntary. So, uh, so given that you can gain status through responsibility, status through uh, evading or abuse of responsibility, or status through consumption or signaling by proxying responsibility. In other words, you can seek rents off someone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, which is what the female strategy is, right? They try to find a guy with resources that they can consume without being responsible for the resources. All right, so you have this another trifunctional
Right.
system of responsibility. So, so my question with Christianity is Princess Margaret's criticism. Are you confusing or conflating, or what is it? Confusing uh, uh, conviction with convenience. In other words, are did Christians develop such tolerance that it became a means of evading
Mm.
responsibility?
Mm. I
And
think,
so that's what, because that's what the 20th looks like me. It's like and it makes sense, right? Because optimism, which is what's necessary for continuous Christian forgiveness, without some test, would lead you to being claiming you're virtuous by really what really is, in other words, claiming you have conviction, which is that you're virtuous, when it's really just convenience and you're being lazy or a crook. And so that's what it looks, that's what the 20th looks like to me. And so I'm asking you if that makes
yeah, that makes total sense
it makes sense.
because it is avoidance of responsibility. Like I don't police the commons because I'm a good Christian. Now, that allows me to avoid the responsibility and claim the virtue.
Right. It's like Christian pacifism in war. Right. That's not okay.
Convenient.
That's very convenient.
Mm.
So because I can't, who's the, oh God, so disconnected from that age of thought right now. I can't get my head around it. So if you look at the attempts by conservatives to produce morality, they use the Christian frame during the 20th century against the Marxist frame, and it was complete failure. First of all, because the Marxists aren't just mistaken, they're disingenuous.
It's like you're going to the fight with the wrong weapons, man.
Right.
Like you think that what you say actually makes a difference to a Marxist, and you're simply mistaken.
Right.
Mao said it well. Power springs from the barrel of a gun.
So they have done their undermining. And so what's happened on the right is that the left has so demoralized them, right, which was their objective. It's very hard to get them to unify. And the reason is that they're already the right's already, the pyramid, the triangle is, the male side is along from liberty to authority, right? And the feminine side, the left side, is just communism, right? And so the problem is the right is already a set of tribes that have difficulty uniting, and then if they're demoralized, they don't have the wherewithal to trust the people from other tribes to work together.
Right. So when I draw the lines, it's like if you look at that triangle, so the triangle with the line, the upright line on the right hand side, and a point to the left.
Mm-hmm.
There's columns like this.
Yes.
Toward the right. These are the septations of the columns of the right that support the left. Because it's the fragmentation that doesn't allow the coalescence of these groups to occur because they don't see the necessity and they're not willing to make the sacrifices necessary to work with their neighbors to stop their common enemy.
Correct.
And so, as I say, the walls that support the left, those are the differences between us are the walls that support the left, and those are coming down because the necessity is that great. The evil is that great, and it is upon us. It's like that. There's interesting. It's like there's several fronts by which we have been affronted, which is there's the COVID one, there's the climate change one, there's the mass migration, great replacement one.
There's a cultural destruction one.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is I'm watching these strains of conversation developing among the people. And there's people that specialize in each of these conversations. And some of them are like there's Christian ones that are talking about spiritual warfare. And it's like the interesting thing to me is to bleed across all those channels and to cause them to cross-pollinate.
Yes.
because it's like that's all that it takes.
Yeah,
Once you,
and I know that's part of your gig. Yes.
that's the common theme of my work is that is just okay. There, be porous between those walls.
Yes.
Well, we will gather enough steam to throw off our oppressors. And that's all. It's a hopeful message.
It's very frustrating. But, you know, you and Brandon were more right than I was about the, like, I can see, I always say this, I can see the incentives, but I don't have a really good job. I'm not a very good judge of how the public will process the information. And so I'm kind of impressed, really, the public is doing as well as they are right now.
They're getting. But there was one person yesterday who was talking about this. Is just drops of information. It's not like there's one piece of information is going to change somebody's mind, but just drops of information that are like lapping at the shore,
Mm-hmm.
and the the persistent nature of the signal will cause the signal to go through even the thickest head eventually. And so the issue is that the just keep beating the drums and gathering forces, and that's all that's occurring. And it will occur because it's like the necessity, it only gets more important.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay. It's just takes time, and it's like the frustration comes because this is the problem of being a high IQ, and the slow kids just are slow down slow.
So fucking painful. Really, it's just so painful.
Yes. Brian asked a question. He said something about um um it was about whether or not the information is going to get in, and or I said it's not that they cannot learn, it's that they will not learn because they prefer to be kept in their ignorant state because it's more comfortable and less work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, but the problem is more and more, it's like, this is just too stupid to keep trying it. That doesn't make any sense. What you just told me, I can recognize the lie, and that makes them look around because there's got to be some fresh coffee around here. It's okay. Just, it's a slow process.
Some
Kind of,
23-year-old girl was out on a video news this morning, and she said, my father was right in that there's a lot of stupid people. And she says, I'm a girl, right? I don't want to believe that. And of course, I'm just writing it off as another dad thing. But it turns out all those things dad said were right. Right. And so we live in our family bubble, in our class bubble, right?
right.
And sometimes and even in our classes, we tend to work in organizations with people of similar class because similar classes occupy similar ranks in the hierarchy of organizations. Now you get some, even in my company, Randy, my CFO, and Jim, my president, they were pretty liberals. And Randy, of course, the extreme. Why? Because they grew up poor, right? And I grew up in a middle class, right? And so I don't have that. I have the aristocratic responsibility thing. And so you could really see how these things were carried into adulthood, right? But that said, what retains that instinct of your childhood is what is not directly influencing your life. In other words, everybody becomes conservative about what they're responsible for.
Mm.
And so what happens is liberals become conservative about what they're responsible for, but they maintain their liberalism for things they're irresponsible for. Very
Mm.
fucking convenient, if you ask me. Whereas conservative says I'm responsible for this, but realistically, I'm still responsible for everything else. And so you just can't get there. There's the idea that they think they're being responsible when they're just being convenient.
Mm.
Right? They're saying this is good for people. Well, it's good as long as it's not your money, right? Right? As long as it's other people's money,
That's right.
it's other people's work, other people's risk, and from the middle class and upper middle class, that's the class that risks the most capital. That's what it takes to middle class, right? Risk capital. I don't mean income middle class. I mean functional middle class. And so middle class, because the classes is just what capital are you responsible for, right? That's all it means, right?
Right.
And so you see that even in your organizations, no matter where you are in life, people carry these things, but they still carry the demarcation is between what are you directly responsible for and what are you not. And what would you like to see is that what happens with women is that they're hyper emotional and but once they have 3 kids, all of a sudden, especially if they're young enough, when they have the 3 kids, then they become sane, which means conservative, responsible, because now the responsibility is projected over these things that are not competent, and that's their view of the world. Whereas men, we just see the world as a distribution of competence and incompetence, and we probably see competence as rare, right?
Sadly.
Sadly. And so we scale that up without having children. And so there's that natural male female bias, but there's also like the people who are in government and academic jobs or big industry or big corporation jobs. They aren't actually responsible for anything. I mean, the window of responsibility is small, but when you're responsible for a small or medium-sized business, or you're responsible for soldiers, you have a different understanding of responsibility is. For a soldier, people can die,
Yes.
right? And for me, if I thought about it, it bothered me. Like I can't go and let all these people lose their
That's right.
jobs and their mortgages and their car payments and their children's savings and their standard, right? That's what you think about. And so, and the reason is you're bearing the risk, right? But what are these people that are in the academy and state and media bearing the risk?
No risk at all.
There's no risk at all.
No, because it's just a pension at the end of the tunnel.
Well, and they're also getting paid to tell people what they want to hear. Whereas, I mean, if you're in business, there's ever-present scarcity. And so you get to tell people the best you can do, not what they want to hear. The best that's possible. Because everybody thinks there's a surplus of income. And what I think is good is great, except that everybody in the company has a different idea of where the money should be spent. And that surplus is actually a thin veneer of frosting on a pretty fat cake of costs.
Yes.
And even when you get in a place like I'm going to pick Microsoft again. I'll pick Microsoft. It's the company I understand in the world the best, right? I mean, it's like part of my genes to understand Microsoft at this point. So, you work at that company or any big company like that. Now, they're an outlier, right? They make a lot of money per employee. So does Apple, right? A lot of money per employee. And that's your real judge. How much money, profit, revenue are you making per employee? Because employees are your only real cost, right? I mean,
that's a very expensive part of the operation.
Right. So, you look at it, what are your profit per employee? Well, those are outlier companies. There's not many apples, and I mean, you can count Fang on your hand, right? I mean, it's not that many of them. But for most companies, there's just a very narrow. But in order to be and get into a position where you're making a lot of money, the way you maintain that money is research and development expenditure.
Mhm.
Right. Whereas for the smaller companies, you have a very little. What's research and development for most companies? It's sales, right? For those big companies, they already have market distribution methods. Their problem is, how do I make sure nobody beats me? Like not like with a stick, but competes. Though there's some value in stick beating, I think, if you look at third world prosecution of street thugs. But anyway, let's go off. No, did I just do another one where I talked about spanking? Did I just do it? Did I just get myself censored again because I was making a bad joke, a lame joke?
Singaporean joke.
Singaporean joke. Okay, I'm making a stupid joke. So anyway, where was I? So anyway,
R&D.
You've got R&D's expensive. Look what Apple.
It's high risk,
and it is. The thing is, the risk goes down the more you spend on it. Right now, if you're Mark Zuckerberg, you spend it on Meta, which cracks me the fuck up.
I don't even know how to process that. I just regard it as this larkish behavior.
I think he went through the Bill Gates experience differently. So once you realize you're the problem, or the outside world thinks you're the problem, you try to find a new way to go. Mm-hmm. And so what Bill said is, I'm going to go be a
different kind of problem.
Different kind of problem. And one that governments won't attack. Right. And what Mark did is he said, I'm going to go be a different kind of problem. And which is far less courageous than what Bill sought out to do. So I've been there where my own board has turned on me. So I understand what happens when your board turns on you and they're wrong. Right. And the problem is in my case, I wasn't wrong. In Gates's case, he wasn't wrong. I mean, the government did turn against the company, and when your own government attacks you, as I can tell you in my experiences, it's pretty fucking evil. In Facebook's case, I mean, that fucking guy cannot admit that he's a scumbag, right? He just can't handle it. He thinks he's doing the right thing. We won't blame it on his background too openly in this discussion. But anyway.
That was so indirect.
That done. I'm getting better.
I just totally appreciate that backhandedness. Oh my.
Oh, anyway. So the insurance responsibility dimension is one of the things we've fleshed out over the past 6 months, and I think that's been a useful anchoring, because once you bring those two in, they're no longer ideals; they're operational actions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that are reducible to costs and investments. So that responsibility versus what's the other word? Insurance.
Yeah,
which is right the same thing, right? That grounding turns out to be, at least I can see it in the work I'm doing with Brandon on the rights and obligations, right? Yeah. It's so obvious that what you're saying is, I'm taking responsibility to insure, and then what's the scope of what I'm insuring?
There you go.
Right, and it's really that simple. And that everybody else is trying to escape responsibility and gain insurance for doing nothing.
So this is it. Goes to this premise, which is increasingly voluminous on the right, which is, no one is coming to save you. That is the message, and it's part of the same message, which is to say, you are going to have to use your own boots to get where you need to go, and you need to work with your friends. And
you need to work with people who disagree with you, but disagree with you less than the enemy. right? I mean, it's like I'm loyal to Christians. I just don't want to live in a fundamentalist universe, but my loyalty's there. I
Right.
mean, I'm loyal to ethno-nationalists, right? Right. I'm loyal to civic nationalists, right? I'm going to be loyal to the crazy right wing, the right, because I understand that they're wrong. They're right to feel abused, right? And I'm actually pretty loyal to the disenfranchised left.
Yes.
They're right to be. So the question is, who are you loyal to, right? In other words, it's not about my way is right. It's about uh, who am I loyal to in defeating an enemy. We've been doing this for thousands of years. You bring a bunch of tribes together, and we share some basic common traits. You know, uh, but if you went to one German tribe to another, their interpretation of our ancestral religion was quite different.
Right.
So their method of governing could be a little different. Their arts and aesthetics could be a little different. Now, realistically, in Europe, they're not that different, but they're still different. Well, it's the same thing between the fascists and the ethno-nationalists and the civic nationalists and the Christian nationalists and the libertarians and the anarchists or the anarcho-capitalists. We have we have differences in what kind of it's basically what kind of order we want to impose, right? That's our difference, right? But we all want order.
Right.
uh,
And so the issue, this goes to the premises, which is we can generate an order that has a big enough tent that allows all those different orders to be established within it.
right, and that's why I focus on the law, is because it doesn't say what's um, all it says is our tribes can have different states, right, to produce what they want.
Multitude of states.
A multitude of states. In other words, it doesn't. What has to be universal is our war against the irresponsible, uninsurable people who are parasites, right? And whether they're parasites because they don't know any better, or they're parasites, right, because they are bad people. I'm not in the camp that thinks most people are bad. I'm in the camp that, if we don't tell people, we don't give people false promises, then they won't perceive themselves as failure. And if we say to people, your class, your abilities, responsibility is only here, and we'll ensure the rest as long as you fulfill the duties you're capable of. But we don't expect people who are, 85 IQs to be fucking rocket scientists or to have fewer car accidents. But they're going to have more car accidents. They're going to have more physical injuries, right? They're going to make poor decisions. All right. Well, but are you doing the duty that we asked of you? Right. Well, you're allowed to make those errors, right? As long as you do the duty. What's the duty? Protect the private common within the limits of your capacity, and then get other people for problems beyond your capacity. It's just doing your duty in a military hierarchy. We don't expect privates to be fucking rocket scientists. We expect them to dig holes, right? Stand in formation and not run. Right? I mean,
right.
It's not rocket science, right? But if you do that, then you're due the respect of a peer, right? Well, if we give people that information, that's great, but false promising everybody they can have some sense of equality, especially of status, rather than gaining respect. In other words, you do respect if you do your duty, regardless of if you're a fucking janitor. Right? If you're a janitor, you do your duty. I grew up with this noblesse oblige thing. So I'm
Yeah,
like, I will be very good to the working man at every fucking opportunity, right?
that's right.
But my peers, if you're my peer, you better fucking hold up to the goddamn standard,
Total line. Right.
right? Because we're the ones carrying that burden. They're
That,
carrying their burden, we carry our burden. And the problem is people don't want to carry burdens. And you add women to the fucking mix, and they're like, I want everybody else to carry my burden. It's a very weird thing to have. Just Pearly things. She's been
yes.
investigating the manosphere of late. The
Oh, yeah.
manosphere,
I've not been following.
Big Tao. What?
I'll say, what did she say?
Well, she's just going through it, and she said, this. I think it was this morning or yesterday. She said something like, "I used to say women shouldn't vote because, but I wasn't serious, and now I'm serious."
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, that's quite interesting.
I can't tell you how many women I know that will express that in private. There's a lot of women who will express that in private, but they won't betray the sisterhood because they're, again, that exposes them to risk.
Right. No, that makes sense. I understand.
And if you look at what women said, that was a great piece I copied and pasted today. Is that women said we already influence men.
How hard was that to figure out? Like, my.
We already influence men to vote the way we want. So there were more men virtue signaling to get chicks.
How hard was that to figure out?
Right? Driving for women's suffrage than there were women. It was mostly men. Right? Because what are they doing? They're virtue signaling to get chicks. Fucking insane. Now, I mean, if you talk about property rights, I'm all in, right. That's like I'm all in for because that's responsibility. Right. This whole voting thing. I mean, even if it was we had there was a difference between caretaking policy, like we have a difference between military policy and trade policy and domestic policy, right?
Okay.
If those abstractions were one thing, like infrastructure and all those things, and then it was more like the church matters, morality and stuff that was legislated, and caretaking and hospitality. If we've broken, I mean, it's hard to break things up that way because of how legal packages are organized. Right. But if women voted for that stuff, I have no problem with it, right? Because men, we tend to be a little, whereas we can be. It's like mansplaining versus women-splaining, right? We can be a little callous when it comes to looking for the edge cases, right?
Right.
And women are not, are the opposite. They're hypersensitive to edge cases. So that might be a good thing. But, and so my thing is, I don't know if this is my usual problem. I'm giving you the opportunity to tease me right now in case you don't see it, in case you don't see it coming.
Telegraphic.
Is it? I don't want to tell women that they don't have a voice.
That's rude, right?
Right.
You couldn't anyway, because they do.
Well, right. And so the problem is, how do you then arrange it so the women do have a voice? But that we're doing is we're not trying to assume everybody's optimum, but that everybody has biases, just like the classes have biases, the sexes have biases.
Right.
So why not just do it as a responsibility question? An interesting thing. I'm sorry I'm dragging this out, but it's just an interesting line of thought, which people will be interested in. So one of the things that the guys from Economics Explained put out very recently was that let's just take the hypothesis that that automation or artificial intelligence is going to make it almost impossible for us to have work.
Okay.
So how the economy breaks down. Well, what's the one production that only we can do? It's children.
That's right.
So you would get paid basically for having children, right? I mean, that would be your thing, because that's the one thing that's really useful. And then once you do that, then it's just the market system does its job, and things, we have basically a recycling system where money is money is taken from the taxes of the company's profit and redistributed to the people in a vicious cycle. But the interesting point is that, would that be a bad thing if our primary function was a primary income was actually to have families? And I'm wondering because that would make us all have very common interest. I just thought it was a great thought
Yeah,
exercise.
it's an interesting one, and it is. I would say then you paid the men for their responsibility for policing the commons,
Yes.
and what responsibility they take up in that role.
And that's just an increase and variation of what my suggestion was, is that we did the WPA, and the WPA was was criticized, whatever. It was people standing around. It's like, right. But does it matter? If you look at WPA projects around the country, there's some of the most beautiful things we've ever produced.
Yeah, there's some local ones here, and it's like you see them. This stuff put in the 30s, still
Right.
still
Still
hype.
there, right?
Oh yeah, it's
So
cool.
why would we move? My argument was just move everybody into the commons economy and out of the production, the goods services economy, and that would be the same thing, right? I mean, so you're just changing the tax structure or the revenue structure so that you can allocate it, and it just becomes fair. Now, there's a lot more problems here because you have international trade and the unequal distribution of resources around the world. But I mean, it's a thought experiment that
Right.
allows you to think of, well, producing commons and producing children, which is the necessary part. And that's the problem right now, is we're not producing children. Uh, is it you have those two things, and we're not producing high investment children, which is more important, or we're not producing high investment children. So, and then if we say, well, the world is pretty ugly that we've made. I mean, if you look at the strip mall universe we've made since the invention of the car, it's pretty fucking ugly. Well, I mean, there's no reason everything doesn't look like frickin' Bruges or Venice, right? I mean, it could look absolutely, or uh, uh, Neuschwanstein. There's not a Neuschwanstein around every corner, right? I mean, there's no reason for it because most of that stuff is just handmade by man,
Right.
and organizing the world for aesthetic purposes turns out to be one of the best investment. Who would have thought pyramids were a good investment? Yeah, we look at Neuschwanstein and all those other castles, right? But you
Yeah.
realize those are decorations. In other words, they were built like Walt Disney's castle, which imitates them, right? Which
Yeah.
is, I've been in a couple of them, and they're just empty inside. They were never finished. They're just monuments, effectively.
Hmm.
Some rooms are. My favorite one is, can't remember where the castle's name now, where the fucking dining table comes is raised through the floor into the rooms. So the servants don't have to. It was fucking hysterical, right? But you look at this thing; it's just a huge castle made of bricks, right? So why would we not want to turn strip mall America into into Disneyland? I mean, it would be a nicer place to live. We'd be happier for it. And no, it shouldn't be these Bauhaus post-war concrete monstrosities that are built
Right.
for general purpose, right? I mean, general purpose reuse, because that's one of the problems in architecture, right? The things are now built for multi-purpose, so they're general. Whereas in the old world, you built things for a purpose, right? And so they were purpose specific, and they had purpose specific design to them, which was
Mhm.
meant to last, right? So it's not impossible to solve the problem. That's my argument anyway. All right, have I talked enough about this fucking subject now that I can go on?
I think that's sufficient.
That's sufficient. All right, so we're going to start working here.
Yeah, we could break the signal here and make a new session if you want.
All right, let's hope everybody enjoyed our chat session.
Yeah, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe and notification and all the little comments and all the nice things we enjoy so much.
Yes, and I do appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to shut this one down. We'll start another one.